Hey guys, welcome to my channel. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you guys how to create a portfolio app using the SwiftUI framework. If you're planning to start learning SwiftUI or if you have started recently, then this video is for you. By the end of the video, you will be comfortable enough to develop your own SwiftUI apps. Let me show you what we'll create. So we have a portfolio app that shows info about the user along with skills and experiences. Both of them have a button. And when you press that, an animation takes place and the section closes. If you tap it again, it expands back. Alright then, let's get started with the tutorial. First we'll open Xcode and create a new SwiftUI project. Let's name it Portfolio and we'll choose the new SwiftUI lifecycle. The minimum deployment target for the project is set to iOS 14.5. Select the exe assets, plist file, preview content and put them inside a group. Name it resources. If you build a project now, it will fail as it cannot find the plist and the preview content. Let's go to build settings and update the paths. Update the path for the preview content and the plist. Let's try building it. And yeah, it's working now. Create another group called code. We'll make groups for controllers, models, views, and services inside it. We'll put portfolio app inside controllers and content view inside views. Next, we need to add some fonts to the project. Let's create a group called fonts. And we'll drag the font and put them inside the font group. For using these custom fonts, we need to add them in the info.plist. I'll open the plist file as source code and add the required entries for the font. Create another group for extensions and create a new file called color extensions. We have added an extension so that it's easier to provide hexadecimal based color values. Let's create a group called utils, and inside it we'll create a new file called font manager. Now to apply these custom fonts with ease, we'll create an enum for the font. We now have an enum called Montserrat. There are separate enum cases for each style. The font function returns a font modifier based on the enum case calling it. You can find these code snippets in the description box below. Let's add the image to the exe assets. And with that, we have finished the setup of the project. Let's create the required models for the app. We need a model for displaying the data. It also needs an array of skills and experiences. Let's create a new Swift file called portfolio. First, we'll make a struct for skill and make it conform to the identifiable protocol. This protocol requires a variable name ID in the model. It makes it easier to use the model with a for each loop. Let's add the skill name and image to the struct. Now we'll create a model for experience. Let's add a struct for the same. Make it conform to the identifiable protocol as well. Add a variable name ID followed by the rest of them. We'll need variables for company name, role, and duration. Now we can create the portfolio model. Add name, role, description, location, skills and experiences array. Now that the model is ready, let's create a view model. Create a new Swift file and name it app model. Declare it as a class and conform to the observable object. By doing that, the view model can be passed and modified by other views. Add a variable for portfolio. I'll add the data using a code snippet. Now the portfolio variable has data for all the fields that we defined before. Let's move on to the content view. Change the name of the view to portfolio view. And let's also change the name for the previews. Add a variable for the app model. Let's remove the hello world and add a Z stack. We'll add a color scheme modifier to the previews and set it to dark. It changes the theme of the preview device to dark theme. Next, let's add a background color to the Z stack using the color struct. We'll use the ignore safe area modifier to make the color fill all the available space. Next, we'll add a scroll view. Set the flow to .vertical and the source indicator params to false. Add a V stack with a leading alignment and put a padding modifier of 24. With that done, let's create another group for support views. We'll add a new SwiftUI view for the user info. Let's name it header view. It's a good practice to create as many smaller views as possible. It has many benefits. Define a variable for passing the app model. If you don't provide the value there, you have to do it in the preview. Let's add a VStack first, followed by the image struct for displaying the image. We'll add a resizable modifier to resize it, and now we can add the frame. Let's use the default width and height of 100 by 100. For adding a circle to the image, we'll use the background modifier. Let's put the circle shape inside it, and you'll see that nothing happens. And that's because the circle has the same frame as that of the image. Now, the easiest way to fix this is to add a padding before the background modifier. Let's do that. Alright, now the circle is visible, and if you check its frame, it's 110 by 110. And that's because we have added a padding of 5 on each side. Let's add the opacity and the shadow modifier next. Let's add the text for the name now. Change the font using the font modifier, and inside it we'll use the Montserrat enum that we created. Add a top padding of 8. We'll add another text for the role. Change the font. Add an opacity and a top padding. Now we need to add a stack because we need to show an image and a text horizontally. We'll use the SF symbol for the image. Before we add modifiers to it, let's add a top padding to the edge stack and an opacity of 0.45. To increase the size of the image, we'll use the font modifier. Next, let's add a text struct for the location. We only need the font modifier here. Okay, one more view to go. Let's add a text struct for the description. Add a font modifier, an opacity of 0.7, a top padding of 24. And to increase the readability along the lines, let's add a line spacing of 12. Let's add a padding of 24 to the previews to see if it looks good. Take note that adding a padding modifier here only affects the preview and not the original view. So we are done with the header view now. Let's add it to our main view. Create another view for skill. Name it skill view. Let's declare a variable for skill. Let's add this variable in the preview and we'll use one of the skills from the app model. Let's start with adding a VStack. Oh wait, we forgot to declare a variable for the width. This width will come in handy later. We need to add some modifiers to the VStack. Let's start with a padding modifier. Let's add the frame modifier with the width variable. Let's add a gray background using the background modifier. Put a rounded rectangle of corner radius 12 inside it. Add an opacity modifier and set the opacity to 0.075. And now we'll add the image. We'll use the SF symbol initializer and pass the image. Use the font modifier to increase the size. And let's add an opacity modifier set 0.8. Add a text struct for the skill name. Add a font modifier. And a top padding. This looks good. So let's add this height to the frame modifier. We are done with this view. Let's create another view for displaying all the skills. We need to show the skills over multiple columns and rows. We'll see how to do that later. Let's create a new SwiftUI view and name it skills view. Let's add a variable for an array of skills. And let's populate the preview with the skills from the app model. Add a variable for the width. The value for this variable will come from the parent view. Remove the hello world and add a VStack, and we'll add an HStack inside it. Set the spacing to 16 and add a text called skills. Add a font modifier and an opacity to it. Next, since the chevron image has an interaction, we'll use the button struct. The button takes an action and a label. We'll add an SF symbol image inside the label. Before we add any modifiers to the image, we need to declare one state variable. We need one state variable because we need to manage the state. We'll declare our state variable as a boolean, and when the value is true, we'll show the skills, otherwise we'll hide it. Now we can add the font modifier to the image. We'll use the rotation modifier to rotate the chevron based on the state variable. When the value of the show skills is true, we won't need any rotation, and when it is false, we'll rotate the image by 180 degrees. Let's quickly run the preview and see if it works. Alright, it's working as expected. Let's fix the color of the image. So the default accent color of the button is blue. Let's add a button style modifier and pass plain button style to fix it. Let's have a look at the skills. So as I said before, they are spanning over multiple columns and rows, and we'll use lazy vgrid for this. Lazy vgrid takes in some columns and it grows vertically. We'll add 3 grid items here. Set the alignment to leading and add a spacing of 12. If you don't pass any enum case inside the grid item, it will take flexible spacing by default, which means that it tries to take all the available space. The spacing of 12 adds a spacing between the rows. Let's add a for each loop to iterate over the skills. Pass the skill to each of the skill view. For the width of the skill view, we'll divide the available width by 3. We are doing that because we want to show 3 columns. Let's also add -15 to provide spacing between the columns. Alright, now the views are getting rendered. Let's add a padding to the preview. Add a top padding of 38 to the lazy V grid. Oh, okay, looks like we forgot to add the leading alignment to the V stack. Now we have to hide the lazy V grid at the press of the button. So let's copy the lazy V grid view and put it inside an if condition. Let's add a geometry reader in our preview and we'll be able to see how this skills view will look in our main view. Now let's run the preview and see how it looks. Okay, so the button is getting rotated and the lazy V grid is getting removed as well. But there is a problem. It's jumping from one state to the other and it doesn't look smooth. To fix this, let's put the state variable toggle inside the with animation block. Set the animation to ease in out and the duration to 0.35. Much better, it looks great now, it's flowing smoothly. We are done with this view now. Create a new SwiftUI file and name it Experience View. Let's add a variable for experience. Add the same to the preview and pass one from the view model. Alright, let's do the usual and add a V stack with a leading alignment. Next we'll add a circle and set the frame to 10 by 10. Let's change the opacity to 0.65. Next, let's add an edge stack with a top padding of 8. Let's put a geometry reader in a preview like how we did it for the skills view. We'll use a rounded rectangle with a corner radius of 8 for the line. Add the frame modifier to it and set the width to 3. We need to add a leading padding so that the line is centered with respect to the circle. It's not clearly visible, so let's add a padding to the preview. Cool. Now we need to add a V stack for the rest of the texts. Add a leading padding so that there is a space between the line and the view. Now we just need to add some text for the role, company name and duration. Let's start with the role. We'll add a font modifier to it. Next, let's add the company name. Add font, opacity and top padding to it. Oh yeah, set the V stack alignment to leading. Let's add another text for duration and we'll quickly add some modifiers to it. Let's add a fixed size modifier to the parent V stack. It makes sure that the views are fixed to their ideal frames. So far so good. Now let's move on and create one more SwiftUI view for list of experiences. Let's name it Experiences View. Add a variable for an array of experiences. And since now we know better, let's add a state variable named showExperiences. We'll use this variable for showing or hiding the experiences. Most of the code is similar to the skills view, so let's just copy all of it and then we'll modify it. Change the name to experiences and then change the name of the state variable. Remove the lazy V grid, we don't need it here. Change the name of the variable that is passed to for each two experiences. Remove the skill view and pass the experiences view. Let's change the value of the state variable to see the experiences view. Now we'll add geometry reader to the preview. Add a padding to the preview. Let's add a bottom padding of 14 to the edge tag. And add a spacing of 24 to the V stack. It's time to run the preview. And great, we are done with all our subviews now. Let's head back to the portfolio view. Add the skills view. Pass the skills using the app model. And we'll pass the width using the UI screens variable. Let's add a top padding of 32. Now we can add the experiences view. Pass the experiences using the app model. And add a top padding of 32. Let's make it 42. Looks good. Let's run the preview and see if it's working as expected. Okay, it's working fine for the most part. There's one problem though, and it's that the header view is moving as we open the skills view. Okay, let's debug and fix it. I think it's a frame problem. Let's start with the frame of the parent stack and then the header view. And yeah, the problem is with the header view. It's not taking all the available space. It's a common problem when working with SwiftUI. Let's open the header view and I'll show you how to fix it. So a SwiftUI view tries to take as much space as it needs by default. And in this case, since this view has a lesser width than the V stack, it's not centered correctly. So what we'll do is we'll use spacers to occupy any available space. Let's put the spacer to the image, put the cursor there and press command and select embed in edge tag. And now we need to put two spacers, one before the image and one after the image, so that the image is still centered. And that's you occupy any remaining space. Alright, let's see if the problem got fixed. Alright, it works. We have done it. Let's build a project and run it in the simulator. Great. Let's see what happens if we change the devices theme to live. Nice. So that's it for this tutorial guys. I hope you liked it. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for upcoming videos. It helps me out and motivates me to create more. The next video is going to be an animation using UI kit. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.